Welcome back to Barton Community College EMS Education for preparation of Module 2 exam for the EMT. In this section, we're going to talk about poisoning and overdose emergencies. I go by the 3 R's when we're talking about poisoning and overdoses. What are the 3 R's? Well, the 3 R's are recognition, reversal, and rapid transport. What do these have to do with anything? You're about to find out. Talking about poisoning and overdose emergencies. So let's go ahead and dive right in with poisoning and overdose emergencies. So in this section, we're going to talk about alcohol, we're going to talk about amphetamines, we're going to talk about sedatives, synthetic cannabinoids, cocaine, hallucinogens, marijuana, opioids, volatile substance, inhalates, carbon monoxide, and poisoning. All of these have everything to do with poisoning and overdose emergencies. The very first one I want to talk about is alcohol. Alcohol is a very common substance that we see in the world today as a substance of abuse. And when we talk about alcohol abuse, we have to keep in mind that there is a difference between social drinking and there's a difference between abuse. When you can't work your life anymore without having that substance, it becomes abuse. When you have to function every single day, and you can't function if you don't have that item or that alcoholic beverage, that drug, whatever it might be, that's abuse. So alcohol abuse, when we're talking about alcohol abuse, we're talking about things that we're going to see with how they're presenting to us. Alcohol is consumed like drugs. It impairs their ability to be cooperative and they can be combative. They're not very cooperative as alcoholics. We may need to involve law enforcement. Signs and symptoms of someone who has alcohol in their system is the odor on their breath. We all have been around someone who has drank alcohol at one point or another and have smelled that odor of alcohol. They're going to have that slurred speech, the poor coordination, the nausea and the vomiting, and that slowed reaction time. They're not going to react as quickly, and this is why it impairs people for driving, and we can have accidents with individuals who are intoxicated. Alcohol also causes blurred vision, confusion, hallucinations. They black out. They lose what they were thinking about doing. They become unresponsive and they come back to, and they might even have an altered mental status. But I didn't put this one in the altered mental status emergencies because it's more about overdosing and poisonings. When we stop alcohol, that abrupt cessation, I want to make sure that you understand this point. They will suffer from delirium tremens, and delirium tremens basically in a nutshell is the hallucinations, seizures, and it's very serious. And one of the main treatments for delirium tremens is alcohol because they can't stop it just so suddenly. They have to do it over a period of time. They also will see with alcohol withdrawal, we'll see confusion and restlessness, similar to someone who is intoxicated, unusual behavior, hallucinations, because their body is used to running on a substance normally that is not there. They'll also have gross tremors of the hand. So keep in mind that whether they have alcohol in their system or they don't have alcohol in their system, alcohol abuse is going to present very similar. So be aware of this, and if you start having someone who goes into seizures, be thinking, were they an alcoholic? Did they start having alcohol? And have they stopped the alcohol recently? And this is why we're having the seizures. We have to have that good differential diagnosis. Signs and symptoms, again, of alcohol withdrawal, they're going to have that sweating, seizures, increased blood pressure, heart rate's going to go fast. The body's out of its homeostasis. Now, we also look at substances in this section, and we talked about different substances like meth. We talked about sedatives. We talked about synthetic cannabinoids, cocaine, hallucinogens, marijuana, opioids, volatile substance, and then we get into poisonings. But let's go ahead and start with meth. Substance abuse is an issue in America. we see individuals every single day taking different substances. You either have substances that are uppers that cause everything to go up. We have the heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, their alert status goes up, or we have drugs that are downers that cause them to become sleepy and their pulse rate to go slower. And when those things, they become really slow and they just don't function so good. And then you have the people who are on uppers and they're tucking really fast and they're doing all those things and they can do all these things that they used to do and they can do it even faster now. So we have to keep those determinations between uppers and downers, and methamphetamines is one of those uppers. It causes increased tachycardia, it causes hypertension, and it can also cause disfiguration. But think about what goes into meth. A lot of volatile substances that are nasty, nasty, nasty. And so they're going to cause a lot of issues. So if you see tachycardia in an individual and they tell you they took meth, that's a key link factor right there. So your uppers are those stimulants that affect the nervous system, and those are your cocaines and amphetamines. And the different ways that they can be taken are snorted, smoked, or injected. Their signs and symptoms, like we were talking about, they could have sweating, increased pulse and breathing rates, they don't sleep, they're excited, they're restless, they may even be a little hyperthermic. That's that increased body temperature where they're so hot and sweaty. Now, our downers are like our sedatives, Ativan, Versed, Valium, GHB, and those are central nervous system depressants. So we have one that affects the nervous system by speeding it up and one that affects the nervous system by slowing it down. And so things like GHB, roofies, barbiturates, sedatives like Versed, Ativan, and Valium that are benzodiazepines, they cause people to become really sluggish, poor coordination, decreased pulse and respirations. Now, when we talk about narcotics are opioids, and they help relieve pain in moderation. However, if they're taken too much, it will depress the respiratory system. And when we depress the respiratory system, we slow down breathing, and we need to speed up the breathing, and so that's where the R comes in with reversal. Right now, we're working on recognition. And so recognition of our narcotics, our opiates, are decreased pulse rate, decreased respiratory rate, pinpoint pupils, profuse sweating. They may even be altered mental status or unresponsive. And so we see all of these different things happening in the opioids. And there's so many different opioids. Heroin, we've got your Dilaudid, your fentanyl, your morphine, oxycodone, OxyContin, Percocet, all different types of generic or brand names of pain meds that is causing an opioid crisis in America. Now, also another substance that might be abused is hallucinogens. And hallucinogens fall under a category that create intense state of excitement, distorted perception, feelings, and that's where our LSD, our MDMA or ecstasy or shrooms, they create a rapid pulse, they're dilated pupils, flushed face, and they're seeing and hearing things. They might even have increased sensations, and that's why they like being in this state, and they're so fluid and wonderful, and everything's distorted. And so hallucinogens are also ones that are being abused in the world we live in today. And then we also have substances that are volatile solvents. Those are inhalants. And those substances, like the silver and gold spray paint, the rush of the vapors when they inhale it in an enclosed environment, they get the rush, and it's a central nervous system depressant. Because of that volatile chemical going in, and we have the lack of oxygenation, the heart rate is going to have to manage, and so they do have this change in heart rhythm, but they have a funny numb feeling. It's that feeling like you get when you take nitrous oxide when you're at the dentist's office, and you have that funny numb feeling, and you have swollen membranes in the mouth because they're trying to get as much oxygen as they can, and you feel dazed and disoriented and in a coma or passed out. That is your volatile chemicals that are at work there. So we have to understand that. And then finally, a couple others that we have here that may not have been covered in past EMS classes, but we also have synthetic cannabinoids. These are becoming a crisis in America because of K2, Spice, whatever brand is with it. Synthetic cannabinoids are like marijuana, which we're going to talk about here very quickly, but Spice and K2, they're a synthetic form. They take grass clippings, they take trash, and they mulch it down into a very small itty bitty substance, and then they add the chemicals to it, which are very similar to the effects of marijuana with cannabis, with the THC, but they change the THC just enough, and they constantly are staying ahead of the federal government because of how they're changing the synthetic compound of the medication, which I call it a medication because it has a reaction on the body, but it is a drug and it's an illegal drug. However, because they're constantly in front of the federal government, they can't put a Schedule 2, Schedule 1, they can't put it on there because they have to study it to put it on the schedule list. And so we're unable to catch all of these. Now, some of them have been put on a schedule list and others haven't. And so you'll find these at head shops, you'll find these at gas stations and areas. And I'm not telling you to go out and take it, but what I am saying is individuals will take this and they can become unresponsive. They can have rapid respiratory rates. They can have increased heart rates. It can cause them to almost like they want to eat your face off. Now, these are different than bath salts, which are designer drugs, and our designer drugs are designed to do certain things, and they can cause excited delirium, which we'll talk about in the psychology, in the psychiatric emergencies chapter or module. So we also talked about stimulants. Those are our uppers. Cocaine. Cocaine is a drug that used to be in Coca-Cola. And it wasn't until about the 1950s that they finally took it out. They were told to take it out in the 1930s, and it wasn't until about the 1950s that they finally took it out of the drink. And cocaine causes vasoconstriction. It also is still used in small substances in ERs today to stop nosebleeds due to the vasoconstriction. It causes it to vasoconstrict in a topical method. But cocaine also increases heart rate because it being a stimulant. Marijuana is like the gateway drug to them all. We're seeing it used for medical purposes, and CBD coming from the marijuana is beneficial. However, the THC, which causes some hallucinations, is still being studied. But right now, it's still an illegal substance in many states. There are some states, however, that have passed it as a recreational substance. But it still does cause changes in mentation, changes in perception. And so understanding this with individuals helps us understand what's going on. And so again, as I've said in the past ones, if you want more signs and symptoms, go to the Merck manual. It will describe these in detail. This is a general overview to provide for you for the upcoming test. But marijuana is going to be smoked. It can be taken with the THC out of it and put into food and eaten, put into suckers and lollipops. But there's so many different ways that it can be used. And the thing about all these types of drugs is any one of these drugs can be paired with another and cut with something. And so we can also have issues in medical emergencies with these drugs that are taken because someone takes marijuana and it's cut with fentanyl. And so now they're having a narcotic overdose due to the opiate that's been added to the marijuana. And so they're having hallucinations as well as, being depressed in their respiratory system. And so we have to think about our reversal agents. Now, reversal agents for our prescription meds that get taken, and people try to overdose on our prescription meds or meds that are oral in nature, we're going to use activated charcoal. However, it's an acid or a alkalytic substance, we're not going to use activated charcoal. And if it's an opiate in base, we're going to use Narcan, and that's going to be our reversal agent for that emergency with a narcotic overdose. Now, the final R is rapid transport, and those individuals who we really can't do anything for at an EMT level, and even at an ALS level, we're still going to rapidly transport these individuals to the hospital where they can get further care and evaluation. Finally, we have two poisonings. The last thing I want to talk about is carbon monoxide. Going into a winter season, you have an increased risk of carbon monoxide because everybody turns their heaters on, they don't clean their fireplaces, and we have carbon monoxide poisoning, and they have headaches, nausea, dizziness, breathlessness, they collapse, and loss of consciousness. If you walk up and you see 4 people laying on the floor like they're having a slumber party, that should be ding, 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 we have a winner. Let's stay out of there. Let's call the fire department, our additional resource, and let's make sure that we can get the carbon monoxide cleaned out of the residence, get the individuals rescued from that residence that the carbon monoxide poisoning is in. The other thing is, when we check for carbon monoxide, we're going to see that people have rosy red lips because the oxygen is trying to get to the surface, and we're trying to get as much oxygen as necessary, so we have some vasodilation, as well as those individuals are going to show on an SpO2 at 98% because they do have oxygen, because carbon monoxide has about 400 times affinity to a red blood cell, higher than oxygen itself. And so how do we fix this? Get them into fresh air and also give them complete oxygen. We're talking like 15 liters non-rebreather because we want to offload that carbon monoxide and onload that oxygen, that dioxide, that 2-oxygen molecule. Not carbon dioxide, but just dioxide. And then we also need to be aware that if there's any types of poisonings with adults, children, and we don't know what to do with that substance, we need to be remembering that we need to call the poison control number, which is 1-800-222-1222. And as you can see here, it's listed. Let me move my video. 1-800-222-1222, and that is Poison Control's number. Call them, and they will walk you through the steps for that individual poisoning emergency, because there's no way we could know every poisoning emergency. But children believe that when there's some type of substance that they see, sometimes it looks like food in the home. And, we've got Windex and Gatorade that look very similar, and we've got Mountain Dew and other substances that look similar. And so we have to keep this in mind, that with pediatrics, chemicals in the home can look like food. Is it candy? Is it poison? So some EMS services will use the Mr. Yuck campaign to talk about this, but ultimately, if you don't know what to do, call Poison Control. They'll walk you through it, and if you can't call them because you're too busy dealing with the critical patient, call dispatch and have them talk to them, or the hospital, and have those individuals be on the phone with Poison Control. Ultimately, that is poisoning and overdoses in a nutshell. I hope that prepares you for the upcoming module exam. Good luck, and have a great week.